The airplane cabin was quiet, but something felt different. It was kind of quiet before something big happened. The kind of quiet before a storm. The plane was getting ready to take off on a long flight from New York to London, and most people were settling in, putting away their bags, checking their phones, or ordering drinks. Keanu Reeves sat in his seat, still and calm. His hands rested in his lap, and a little silver cross on a thin chain around his neck caught the light from above. He wasn't doing anything special. He was just sitting there, but somehow people noticed him. There was something about him, something steady, something peaceful. Across from him, Elon Musk adjusted his fancy suit. He wasn't used to sharing space with others, especially on a private VIP section of a flight. Elon built his empire by questioning everything, by pushing the world forward, by making sure he was always the smartest man in the room. He looked at Keanu again, eyes flicking to the small silver cross around his neck. Then he smirked. That same smirk he always had when he was about to challenge someone. He leaned back and spoke just loud enough for a few rows of passengers to hear. I thought logic replaced superstition a long time ago. At first, there was a small chuckle from a couple of passengers. But then silence. A silence so thick it felt like the whole cabin was holding its breath. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't react with anger. He simply turned his head and looked at Elon. There was no sarcasm in his expression, no challenge, just a deep, calm gaze. The kind of look that made even the most confident man hesitate. Elon turned away, still smirking, but something was off. The mood in the cabin had shifted. A woman who had been sipping champagne paused. A businessman lowered his tablet. Everyone felt it, even if they didn't understand why. The young flight attendant, nervous but professional, greeted Keanu as he took his seat. Her eyes lingered on the necklace for just a second, but she said nothing. Smart move. Keanu sat back, adjusting the small cross over his shirt, and looked out the window. He wasn't bothered. But the air in the plane was different now, charged, tense, like something unseen was moving through the space between them. Elon, always the provocateur, couldn't resist. He glanced at Keanu again and leaned forward, tapping his fingers together. You know, he said, his voice smooth but sharp, symbols like that used to mean something. Now they're just nostalgia. A way for people who are afraid to think for themselves. This time the words landed like tiny daggers. Not shouted, not aggressive, just sharp enough to cut. A few passengers looked up. A businessman in his 40s raised an eyebrow. A young woman a few rows back glanced over the top of her book. The tension had returned, but this time it was heavier, more deliberate. Keanu remained still. Not frozen, present. The kind of presence that can't be faked. Slowly, he turned his head and locked eyes with Elon. It wasn't a glare, it wasn't a challenge. It was something deeper. Something that made Elon look away just for a moment. Elon smirked again, but this time, it didn't feel as strong. He tapped his phone and muttered under his breath, I bet this will trend before we even land. The arrogance lingered in the air like smoke. The unavoidable. Then something small but powerful happened. A quiet voice, barely above a whisper, broke the silence. Is that really him? A teenage boy asked his mother. That's Keanu Reeves, right? His mother smiled softly. Yes, sweetie. That's him. Keanu heard it. He smiled gently but didn't take his eyes off Elon. Elon leaned in again, lowering his voice but making sure it still carried enough weight to be heard. I'm just saying, man, you're Keanu Reeves. You dodged bullets, saved the world, and survived assassins. I thought you were smarter than to wear something like that, like it's some kind of armor. And those words, were the final push. Not because Keanu was angry. He wasn't. But the moment was asking for the truth. And Keanu Reeves always answered with the truth. He leaned forward, carefully, like someone who was about to share something real, something important. His voice was deep, steady, and calm, so steady that everything else around it felt unstable. This, he said, lifting the cross in his palm, is not just a symbol. It's a memory. It's painful. It's 1,000 nights when I thought I wouldn't make it, and one reason why I did. The airplane went completely silent. Even the low hum of the engine seemed quieter. Elon said nothing. The people around them weren't just listening, they were feeling. Keanu continued. I wore this cross the night I sat beside my mother's hospital bed as she took her last breath. I wore it when I felt nothing, and it reminded me that I could still feel it. Not because of the metal, but because of what it stands for. He paused, his voice never shaking. Faith. Not in some invisible man in the sky, but in something deeper. Something beyond explanation. The kind of faith that says, even in pain there is purpose. His words didn't need to be loud. They carried more weight than anything Elon had ever built. One by one, people stopped pretending not to listen. The businessman in the second row leaned back, arms crossed, nodding slightly. The teenage boy's eyes were wide. The young woman put her book down completely. Elon blinked. Then he shrugged, stalling for time, trying to find something to say. Sure, he finally muttered. Personal experiences. I get it. But the world doesn't run on feelings, Keanu. It runs on logic, science, and progress. Keanu smiled, shaking his head. You confuse logic with wisdom, he said. Progress with purpose. That hit like a wave. A woman in the aisle whispered, wow. Elon leaned back, his lips pressing together. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Keanu turned toward the window, taking a deep breath. Then he spoke again, and his words hung in the air like something timeless. I've seen people die with everything, money, power, fame, and still feel empty. And I've seen people with nothing holding on to a symbol like this and feeling more peace than the richest man alive. It wasn't a mic drop. It was a soul drop. A truth so deep it didn't need to be loud to be heard. Elon didn't speak again. Not yet. But others did. A man leaned toward his seatmate and whispered, I didn't know he was that deep. Another person tapped on their phone, muttering, this is going viral. And they were right. Because someone had started recording. Not out of disrespect, but out of respect. And that's when the first big twist happened. A flight attendant, unsure whether to interrupt or just watch, slowly walked toward them. She leaned toward Elon and asked, Sir, would you like a drink? Elon nodded quickly. Then she turned to Keanu, hesitated, and asked, Mr. Reeves, would you like anything? Keanu shook his head politely. No, thank you. The flight attendant stood straight again, but before she left, she whispered, Thank you for that. Then she walked away, trying to stay professional. But something had changed. Keanu Reeves hadn't just spoken up for his necklace. He had reminded everyone on the plane about something important. Something bigger than money or logic. And while Elon Musk sat staring at his phone, trying to make sense of it all, Keanu had already shared something that logic couldn't explain. And if you're still reading this, if you can feel even a little of what was happening in that moment, don't stop now. Keep going, because what happens next will surprise everyone, including Elon. By the 20-minute mark of the flight, the air felt different. Not because of bumps or turbulence, but because of tension. The kind that doesn't shake the plane but shakes people's feelings. Elon Musk sat stiffly now, his eyes moving between his phone screen and the small silver cross hanging around Keanu's neck. It was as if he was trying to rewrite the last 10 minutes in his mind. But Keanu? Keanu was calm. He was breathing slowly, sitting comfortably, his hands resting near his tray table. The cross around his neck shimmered softly in the cabin lights. It hadn't moved. And that made Elon uncomfortable in a way he didn't understand. Elon was used to winning conversations. He was used to proving people wrong with facts, numbers, and big words. But Keanu hadn't argued, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even tried to prove anything. And yet, everyone on the plane was paying attention to him, not to the billionaire who builds rockets. The quiet man in seat 2A, wearing worn-out sneakers and a small silver cross, had become the center of something important. Elon wasn't ready to give up. He cleared his throat and leaned forward, speaking louder now so others could hear. You know, he said, faith is just a way for people to avoid the truth. The universe doesn't care about us. There's no meaning, just science, numbers, and choices. That necklace is just metal. It can't save you. It never could. No one gasped, but the silence in the cabin grew heavier. Keanu didn't blink. He didn't get angry. He just looked at Elon, not as an enemy but as someone who was lost, someone who didn't understand. Then, in a voice so soft that it made the whole plane feel even quieter, Keanu said, That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Elon sat back, surprised. He wasn't angry. He was confused. Keanu kept speaking, his voice gentle but strong. To go through life thinking nothing means anything, that love is just chemicals and pain doesn't matter. That's not science, Elon. That's sadness pretending to be logic. Elon let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't real laughter. It was more like a reaction, like a defense. You think meaning is real just because it feels real? Feelings lie. Keanu tilted his head. So do numbers when they're used without wisdom. And then, something unexpected happened. A woman sitting 2 rows back stood up. She looked about 60 years old, with silver hair tied back and a soft cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. Excuse me, she said. Her voice was clear but kind. I wasn't going to say anything, but I lost my son last year. He was 29. Cancer. Before he passed, he told me the only reason he wasn't afraid was because of a little cross, just like yours, Mr. Reeves. Elon's eyes darted toward her, unsure if he should respond or stay quiet. She stepped into the aisle, her hands shaking slightly. "He used to watch your movies, Mr. Reeves. When he couldn't sleep, he'd say they made him feel brave. He told me you reminded him that being quiet doesn't mean being weak." Her voice broke for a moment. She took a deep breath and continued. "So, I just wanted to say thank you. Not for acting, for existing." No one clapped. They didn't need to. Her words filled the entire cabin like a warm, heavy blanket. Elon looked like he wanted to disappear. Not because he lost an argument, but because he finally understood that there was never an argument in the first place. Keanu nodded, his hands folded. "Thank you for sharing that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman sat down. And in that moment, she had made more of a point than all of Elon's logic put together. But it didn't stop there. A young man in his 20s raised his hand. "I grew up atheist," he said. "But I still carry something my grandma gave me. Not because I believe in it the way she did, but because I believe in her. And that's enough." Another voice joined in. Then another. People started sharing their own stories. Stories of love, loss, hope. And through it all, Keanu Reeves sat quietly, letting them speak. Not as a hero, not as a preacher, just as a person who listened. Elon, now visibly shaken, muttered, "This is crazy. You're acting like he's some kind of prophet." Keanu turned to him and softly said, "No one said I was. But maybe you should ask yourself why you need me not to be." And that's when the third big thing happened. Elon's phone lit up. Then again. Then again. A video had been uploaded online. Someone on the plane had recorded the conversation. And now it was everywhere. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. And at the top, one quote, "You confuse logic with wisdom, progress with purpose." Elon's own social media platform had just turned him into a meme. But not the kind he liked. "Soul over software," one comment read. "The cross carried more weight than the rocket," said another. "The man who owns the skies just got grounded by the man who walks among us." Elon's grip tightened around his phone. He wanted to post something, to explain, to fight back. But he knew anything he said would only make it worse. Keanu hadn't tried to embarrass him, and that's what made it embarrassing. The quiet truth was stronger than any argument. Elon had spent his life building things that could reach the stars. But right now, in a simple airplane cabin, he had never felt smaller. And if you're still reading this, if your heart is pounding like ours, don't stop now. Because what happens next will shake Elon Musk in a way no engineer can fix. At 32,000 feet, with clouds rolling beneath them like waves of silence, first class had become something no one expected. Not a place of luxury. Not a place of status. A place of truth. Elon Musk stood up. He didn't yell, but he wanted everyone to listen. "That's enough," he said loudly. "This has gone too far. I only made a small comment. I didn't attack anyone. But now, it seems like I'm being made into the bad guy just because I asked about a necklace? Really?" Keanu Reeves didn't move. He just looked at Elon. His face was calm, kind, not angry. He wasn't trying to fight back. He didn't need to. But Elon wasn't done talking. "You all think he's some kind of hero," Elon continued, "just because he told a sad story? Just because he stayed quiet while I spoke the truth?" He pointed at Keanu's necklace. "That's not the truth. That's just feelings. That's just a made-up story people believe in." And that was the moment everything changed. A woman sitting in seat 3B stood up. She was older, with silver hair and strong eyes. She looked straight at Elon. Her voice was clear and steady. "Son," she said, "I've been quiet this whole time. I listened. But now I need to say something." She looked around the cabin, then back at Elon. "I lost my husband in a war. A war that happened long before your time. He was a man of science just like you. He was an engineer. He built bridges. He loved numbers and facts. But the night before he left for war, he gave me a small cross just like that one." She pointed to Keanu's necklace. "He told me, this doesn't make sense, but it helps me be brave." Her voice didn't shake. It was strong. "I've carried it every day since. So don't you stand there and call it just feelings." The whole cabin was silent. Keanu gave the woman a small nod, full of respect. Elon's face changed. He didn't look angry now. He looked unsure. Like he was thinking about something he hadn't thought about before. He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again. He had no words. For the first time in a long time, Elon Musk didn't know what to say. And at that moment, everyone in the cabin understood. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about who was smarter. It was about something bigger, something Elon had forgotten a long time ago. The plane kept flying, but inside the cabin, everything felt different. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, meaningful. People looked at Elon not with anger but with something softer, maybe even pity. Elon sat down. His fingers twitched as he picked up his phone. He opened an app, then closed it. Opened another, then closed it. He was looking for something, some kind of control. But there was none here. No algorithms, no business deals, no engineers to back him up. Just people. And people weren't as easy to control as numbers on a screen. Keanu leaned back in his seat. He wasn't smiling, but he also wasn't upset. He had nothing to prove. He had no reason to fight. And that was the difference between him and Elon. Elon had spent his whole life trying to prove something. To the world, to himself. But Keanu didn't need to. He just was. A young man, maybe in his 20s, took off his headphones. He had been watching everything unfold. Now he looked at Elon and said, "I just saw the clip online." He shook his head. "This is real." People around him nodded. Elon flinched. It was one thing to argue with a room full of people. It was another thing to realize the whole world was watching. A notification sound came from someone's phone. A new headline. A new post. Keanu Reeves' name was trending. So was Elon's. And the comments were not on Elon's side. One person chuckled. Then another. It wasn't mean-spirited, but it was there. The realization that the man who had always been in control was, for once, completely out of his element. Elon clenched his jaw. He leaned forward, staring at Keanu. "You think you've won something here?" Keanu met his gaze. His voice was quiet but strong. "There's nothing to win. Only something to lose. And that's your humanity if you stop believing in anything but yourself." Elon scoffed. "Easy to say when the world worships you." Keanu tilted his head. "No one worships me. They just see something in me that you've been afraid to see in yourself." Elon's breath hitched. His eyes flickered with something, anger, confusion, maybe even fear. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to feeling small. His voice rose. "You don't know me," he snapped. "You don't know what I've sacrificed. What I've built. The pressure. The expectations. You walk around with your calm voice and your tragic past like it makes you wiser. But I live in the real world. I carry the weight of the future. And you get applause for saying nothing." Keanu didn't argue. He just let the words settle. Then, in the same soft tone, he said, "The future doesn't need a man who knows everything. It needs someone who feels something." The words hit hard. Like a punch with no wind-up. The kind of hit that lands before you even realize it's coming. Elon sucked in a sharp breath. His hands curled into fists on his lap. He wasn't just losing a debate. He was losing control of the moment, of the room, of himself. Another voice cut through the silence. A flight attendant, young and nervous, stepped forward. "Gentlemen," she said hesitantly. "Please. Everything okay?" Keanu nodded. "Everything's okay." Elon didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. His mind was racing, but for the first time there were no easy solutions. No tweets could fix this. No money could buy back the moment. The whole world was watching, and for the first time in his life, Elon Musk had no idea what to do. As the plane soared through the sky, two men sat in silence. One with a small cross on his chest and peace in his heart. The other with the world in his hands but nothing in his soul. And the whole world kept watching. For the first time he sat down not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Something inside him broke, not in a way people could see but deep inside where no one else could feel it. It was the kind of break that happens when someone who always thinks they are right suddenly isn't sure anymore. His confidence cracked, and underneath, there was only fear and pride. Then, something unexpected happened. The voice of the pilot came over the speakers in the airplane cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a calm and steady voice, "this is your captain speaking. We are flying smoothly over the ocean, but I hear that there has been some, deep thinking happening in first class." There was a short pause, then a small laugh. "I just want to remind everyone that this crew believes in respect. Not just the kind written in rules, but the kind that comes from being human. No belief, no symbol, no story should ever be treated like it doesn't matter. Not up here in the sky and not down there on the ground." Some people in the cabin clapped. Some clapped softly. Others clapped louder. Elon Musk, sitting by the window, felt his face grow warm. He wasn't in control anymore. His power hadn't been taken from him. He had let it go without realizing it. Keanu Reeves hadn't tried to defeat him. That was what made it even harder. Keanu had simply stayed calm. He refused to be pushed around, and that quiet strength had pulled everyone's attention toward him like gravity. And then something else happened. A teenage boy who had been sitting nearby stood up. He walked down the aisle holding something in his hands, a notebook. He stopped in front of Keanu and asked in a small voice, "Can you sign this?" Keanu smiled, took the notebook, signed his name and gave it back. The boy grinned. "You're even cooler in real life." Keanu didn't laugh or joke. He simply looked at the boy and said, "Thank you." Everyone in the cabin watched this happen. A boy with a dream. A man with kindness. And a billionaire who, for the first time, didn't know what to say. Then, something else. One final moment. A passenger sitting behind Elon leaned forward and spoke just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "You picked the wrong person to make fun of. It wasn't mean. It wasn't loud. It was just the truth." And Elon heard it. Every single word. Because the truth doesn't have to shout. It just has to be there. If you are still listening and you feel the quietness, the stillness, the strange feeling that comes when arrogance meets kindness, then keep watching. Because in the next part, you'll see what happens when Elon tries to fix his image and ends up losing something much more important. His sense of self. What's coming next? Let's just say by the end, the cross around Keanu's neck won't be the only thing that shines. The first-class cabin became quiet again, but it wasn't the usual kind of quiet. It wasn't the hush of a fancy airplane ride or the stillness of flying high above the world. It was different. It was respect. Keanu Reeves hadn't said much during the flight, but somehow he had spoken the loudest. His presence alone changed everything. His small silver cross, old and worn, seemed to glow, not because of the cabin lights but because of what it meant to people. It wasn't just a necklace anymore. It was a message. It showed people their fears. It softened their pride. It made them think twice about what they believed. And for Elon Musk, it did something even bigger. It made him listen. Elon was not used to listening. He had built his life around speaking, about ideas, about the future, about things that no one else understood. He liked to be the smartest person in the room. But now, sitting in that airplane seat, all his big ideas suddenly felt small. Not even his own words did. He had tried everything, logic, sarcasm, even a little bit of rudeness. But none of it had worked. Nothing had shaken the man across from him. And now the world was watching. His phone buzzed again. More and more notifications. Headlines were everywhere. Keanu versus Elon. The flight that changed everything. The cross that shook the internet. Tech billionaire mocked faith, got humbled instead. Elon felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even embarrassing. It was something deeper. Something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Doubt. It slipped in quietly like a whisper. It wove itself into the cracks in his confidence. He stared at the seat in front of him, his lips slightly parted, trying to find something, anything, that made sense. Code. Numbers. Spacecraft. Business. That was what he knew. That was what he trusted. But none of that worked here. And that scared him. Across the aisle, Keanu moved slightly. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a performance. It was just natural. He pulled out a small, folded photograph. The edges were bent. The colors had faded with time. He looked at it for a moment, softly. Elon noticed. Everyone noticed. Even the flight attendant paused to watch. Keanu didn't say anything. He just held the photo gently, then placed it face down on his tray table. A message quietly shared. Elon swallowed and cleared his throat. He felt uncomfortable again. "Who's in the photo?" he asked. His voice was tight. Keanu looked up. "My mother," he said. "Taken 2 weeks before she passed." He tapped his cross lightly. "She gave me this. She said I'd need something to hold on to when the world got too loud." He paused. "I didn't understand it then. I do now." Elon leaned back in his seat, staring at Keanu. He wanted to roll his eyes. He wanted to say something smart. But nothing came. And for a man who always had something to say, that was the real loss. Then, another surprise. A middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap stood up. "Hey," he said. "Sorry to interrupt. But Elon, I know who you are. I've followed your work for years. Big fan, really." Elon looked up, a little hopeful. "But today," the man continued, "you made me think about something." He took a breath. "My wife, she's been fighting cancer for 2 years. You know what helped her through? Not numbers. Not facts. Not tweets. A cross. Just like that one." He nodded toward Keanu. "So maybe next time, before you call something a crutch, remember, some people needed to walk again." The cabin froze. Elon looked down. Not in shame, but in the kind of humility that only comes when you realize that your words don't have as much power as you thought they did. And then Keanu spoke again. Quietly. Calmly. "Elon," he said, "I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're afraid." He paused. "And that's okay. Most of us are. But making fun of what helps other people won't give you peace. Elon looked up. For the first time, his face wasn't defensive. I don't know how to believe in something I can't control, he whispered. It wasn't meant for everyone to hear. But they did. Keanu nodded. That's where belief starts, he said. Letting go. It wasn't just an answer. It was an invitation. And Elon felt it. The airplane was completely silent. No one worked. No one sipped their drinks. The moment had taken over. Something deeply human had entered the air, and no one wanted to disturb it. He looked at the small cross again. This time he wasn't laughing at it. He wasn't even confused. He was just looking at it like he wanted something real. Something strong. Something true. And then, in a very quiet voice, almost like a whisper, he asked, "Do you think it's too late?" Keanu didn't even pause. He answered right away. It's never too late to believe in something bigger than yourself. That was the real surprise. Not that Elon Musk had been embarrassed, but that, for just a moment, he let himself wonder. He let himself be open, even just a tiny bit. If you are still reading this, if this moment means something to you like it did to the people on that plane, take a second. Comment the number 9 if you believe kindness can change a person more than shame ever could. Because in part 7, the rest of the world starts paying attention to what's happening on this plane. And what they see will shock everyone. By the time the plane flew over the ocean, it wasn't just moving through the sky. It was moving through a storm of attention. People's phones were ringing and buzzing in their pockets, purses and trays. The news had caught on. Videos from the first-class cabin were spreading fast, faster than anyone could stop them. And no matter how hard Elon Musk tried to sit still, the internet outside was exploding. What started as a simple argument between a rich tech genius and a quiet, well-loved actor had turned into something bigger. A conversation about pride. About faith. About listening. Truly listening. Elon looked at his phone like it had betrayed him. On the screen, there was a picture of his face, caught in the moment when he had laughed at Keanu's necklace. The caption underneath it read, "I thought logic replaced superstition long ago, Elon Musk." Under that, there were millions of comments. Some were harsh. Some were mean. This is what happens when a man builds rockets but loses his soul. Keanu just showed us that kindness is stronger than ego. He finally met someone who didn't back down. Keanu hadn't moved. He was still sitting in seat 2A, quietly sipping his water. Every now and then, he looked out the window like he hadn't just started one of the biggest conversations of the year. And that was part of what made him different. He wasn't trying to prove anything. And that's why it was working. Elon was used to people disagreeing with him. That wasn't new. But this wasn't just people choosing sides. It was people telling stories. Underneath the viral video, thousands of people were posting pictures. Pictures of their own crosses, their lockets, their prayer beads, their family keepsakes. Each one with a caption that said something like, "It may not make sense to you, but it saved me." Elon sat in his seat, trapped in a moment he couldn't control. He couldn't fix it with an update. He couldn't program it away. He couldn't make it disappear. The plane hadn't fully settled down. And maybe it never would. A woman sitting across from Keanu reached out and said softly, "I just saw the video. You didn't have to say anything, but thank you for what you did say." Keanu gave her a small smile. His hand was still resting over his necklace. "I didn't say it for attention," he said. "I said it because someone needed to hear it. Maybe even him." He nodded slightly toward Elon. Not as a joke. Not to mock him. But with kindness. Elon looked up slowly. As if the words had reached somewhere deep inside him, past all the comments and the trending posts. And for the first time he spoke not as a man who knew everything, but as a man who had a question. "What if I was wrong?" The words fell from his lips like heavy stones. Keanu turned fully toward him now. The rest of the cabin went silent. Everyone held their breath. "You weren't wrong," Keanu said gently. "You were certain. There's a difference." Elon blinked. "And certainty is bad now?" Keanu shook his head. "No. But when it stops you from seeing someone else's truth, it can be dangerous." There it was. Not an insult. Not a fancy quote. Just the kind of sentence that sticks with people for years. Elon didn't answer. But his silence said everything. For a man who tweeted 100 times a day, the fact that he had nothing to say now meant something big. And then, another shock. A message popped up on his phone. He read it. And his face changed. The screen's glow reflected in his eyes, showing part of the subject line. Board pulls Tesla statement. The message continued. "We do not endorse Mr. Musk's personal views on religion." His own company was stepping away from him. He stared at the words. His throat felt dry. He looked up again, and this time something was missing. Confidence. For once, the man who sent rockets to space looked small. And Keanu saw it. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "Losing influence doesn't mean losing yourself. Sometimes, it's the only way to find who you were meant to be." Elon looked at him. And for the first time, his eyes weren't sharp. They were glassy. Not because he was sad, but because he was confused. He had spent his whole life figuring out complicated things. But he had never understood something so simple. Being present. Just being. Another notification. This one from his publicist. Do not respond. The internet has turned against you. Wait it out. But Elon wasn't sure he could wait this one out. This wasn't just a bad news cycle. This was a mirror. And everyone had already seen his reflection before he was ready to face it himself. And then something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, walked down the aisle holding her father's hand. She stopped next to Elon's seat. Her dad leaned down and whispered, "It's okay. Go ahead." She looked up at Elon. "Mister," she said shyly. He turned to her, surprised. "Yes. My grandma says when someone is really mean, sometimes it's because they forgot who they were." Elon swallowed hard. "Maybe," he said softly. The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny angel keychain. She held it out with her small hands. "You can borrow this," she said. "It helps me when I get scared." Elon didn't know what to do. His fingers shook a little as he took it. "Thank you," he said. His voice wasn't strong anymore. It was quiet. "That's very kind of you." The girl smiled. "You're welcome." And just like that, the man who sent cars into space was brought back down to Earth by a little girl's kindness. The plane kept flying. The engines hummed softly. But something had changed. Elon had changed. Not completely. Not overnight. But something inside him had cracked open. Keanu leaned back in his seat and finally closed his eyes. Not to sleep. Just to rest. His job here, whatever it was, seemed done. He hadn't argued. He hadn't fought. He had just been. And somehow that had been enough. Elon, the little angel keychain, was walking back to his seat with his dad, giggling softly. They didn't even know they had caused a ripple of attention. Elon stopped, frozen, his fingers tightly holding onto that tiny plastic angel like it was the most important thing in the world. In front of him was a man he had once made fun of, but now that same man was being quietly respected by people from all over. The man wasn't enjoying it though. He wasn't trying to show off. He was getting ready to do something important. Keanu, that man, reached up with one hand and gently touched the crucifix on his chest. For a moment, he held it between his thumb and finger, feeling the weight of all the memories it carried. He thought about all the hospital rooms, the tears, and all the nights he spent praying for something to hold on to. Then, without saying anything, Keanu slowly took off the chain around his neck. The sound of the small metal piece falling into his hand was too quiet to hear, but somehow, everyone felt it. Lucas, the flight attendant, had been watching the whole time. She was a little nervous but walked up to him. "Mr. Reeves, is everything okay?" she asked softly. Keanu smiled and said, "More than okay." He stood up slowly, turned to his left, and began walking toward the back of the plane. Everyone looked at him, even Elon, who sat up straight, confused but paying attention. Keanu walked past 3 rows of seats and stopped next to a window seat at the back of first class. There, sitting by the window, was a boy no older than 12. The boy was wearing a medical mask under his chin. His eyes, though tired, lit up the moment Keanu looked at him. The boy's mother gasped quietly. "Oh my God," she whispered, reaching for her son's hand. Keanu raised a finger to his lips, asking for silence. He didn't want attention, just peace. He knelt down beside the boy and said, "Hi there, I'm Keanu." The boy's eyes widened and whispered, "I know." Keanu smiled. "I noticed your wristband," he said, pointing to the bright yellow medical bracelet on the boy's wrist. "I've had one of those too. A few, actually." The boy tilted his head, curious. "Really?" Keanu nodded. "Hospitals aren't fun, but sometimes they're where we learn how strong we really are." Then came the moment that would change everything for the second time that day. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver crucifix, the same one that had started all the attention earlier. It had sparked a conversation, some people upset, some people defending it. But now it was something different. Keanu held the crucifix up and looked the boy in the eyes. "This has gotten me through a lot," he said. "And I think it's time someone else carries it for a while." The boy blinked. "For me?" Keanu nodded. "Only if you want to." You don't have to believe in what it means to me, just believe in what it can mean to you. With shaking hands, the boy slowly reached out and took the necklace. The boy's mother started crying. Lucas, the flight attendant, was crying too. A passenger nearby placed a hand on their heart. Someone quietly took a picture, but not to show it off, not yet. They knew they were seeing something rare. Keanu stood up and put a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're stronger than most men I know," he said. The boy smiled. "So are you." Keanu chuckled. "Maybe. But today you're the one with the power." Keanu turned around and walked back to his seat, but the cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was full of life, full of awe. Something pure had just happened. People were in awe of what they had just witnessed. When Keanu returned to his seat, Elon was waiting. He didn't speak at first, just watching Keanu. Elon's face was somewhere between feeling sorry and showing respect. "Why him?" Elon finally asked. "Why give it to that boy?" Keanu sat down, took a breath, and said, "Because he still has time to believe in something before the world tells him not to." Elon looked away, his mouth tight, but his eyes were a little wet again. Then, in a surprising move, Elon pulled out the little plastic angel from his pocket and set it gently on the armrest between them. "Maybe we're both carrying something now," he said. Keanu looked at the angel. His expression softened. "Maybe we're finally going in the same direction." No one had cameras on them, no reporters were around. There was no dramatic music, just two men sitting together. One man had carried the weight of the world in his hands, and the other had learned how to let it go. In that moment, Keanu Reeves had done something more important than anything social media could ever make viral. He passed on hope. The little boy held the necklace in his hands, his face glowing. And across millions of screens, the moment went viral. But it wasn't because it was shocking. It was because it was real. The necklace had been mocked, defended, and then passed on. Now, it was a symbol of something more than just controversy. It was a symbol of hope. A few minutes later, the plane landed. The seatbelt lights blinked on, but no one moved. Normally, people would rush to gather their things, but not now. Not after what had just happened. The energy in the cabin was different. It wasn't because they were landing, but because something much bigger had just happened. Keanu sat quietly, his hands resting on his lap. The spot on his chest where the crucifix had been was now only a memory. Across from him, Elon Musk stared out of the window. But he wasn't looking at the clouds or the city in the distance. He was staring at himself. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about his next move. He was thinking about what had just happened. The wheels of the plane touched down with a soft thud. The cabin didn't react with relief, but with reverence, because they all knew something big had just happened. As the plane taxied to the gate, the phones began to reconnect to service. Within moments, the cabin was filled with glowing screens showing messages, news alerts, and social media notifications. The story had exploded. But what no one expected, what surprised even Elon, was how it exploded. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't people trying to cancel anyone. It was full of gratitude. The clip of Keanu giving the crucifix to the young boy had become bigger than the original moment. It was no longer just a story. It had become a symbol, not just of kindness but of belief in something greater than ourselves. And Elon, he wasn't being attacked. Instead, people were sending him messages, asking him to listen and to believe in something. "You don't have to be right all the time," one message said. "Just be real. Start listening. You'll find yourself again. We still believe in you, Elon. Just believe in something too." Elon read every single one of those messages slowly. When he finished, he turned to Keanu and said, "I thought I was losing everything. Turns out I was just being handed something else." Keanu smiled softly. Sometimes the most valuable things can't be built. They can only be received. The cabin door opened and first class was called to board. But no one rushed. They moved slowly, carefully, like they were leaving something sacred behind. As Keanu walked toward the exit, the little boy held up the crucifix and smiled at him. "I'll take care of it," the boy said. Keanu knelt beside him. "You don't need to take care of it," he said gently. "Just let it remind you to take care of you." The boy nodded, and Keanu stood up and made his way to the exit. Elon followed behind him. There were no cameras, no rush, just a quiet group of people who had shared something extraordinary together. As they stepped off the plane, a man in a suit was waiting outside. "Mr. Musk, the press is waiting," he said. Elon glanced at Keanu and then said, "Tell them I have nothing to say." "Not yet," he added. And then the final twist came. A week later, a short video appeared online. No big announcement, no press release. Just a black screen that faded into Elon Musk sitting alone in a chair. No suit, no fancy background, just him looking real. He stared into the camera and said, "I mocked something I didn't understand." That's what fear does. It dresses itself up as intellect. But someone on that flight reminded me what true intelligence really looks like. Not dominance, not facts, but stillness, humility, presence. He paused. "I'm not here to rebrand. I'm here to relearn. Thank you, Keanu. And thank you to the boy who now carries the necklace. Thank you for reminding me what it means to carry hope." That video went viral too, but not because it was shocking. It went viral because it was true. Keanu, though, never responded publicly. He didn't need to. He had already said everything he needed to say, without shouting, without showing off, without judgment. He had simply shown up as himself, with his story and his faith. And that had echoed across the world in a place where people were hungry for noise. Instead of noise, Keanu's quiet action changed everything. If you like this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.